honorable ministers, honorable members. I think the copy of the resolution has been already handed over to every one of you. This resolution provides an overview of the evidence demonstrating successive Sri Lankan government's genocide against Tamils, and respectfully request the ongoing United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights Investigation on Sri Lanka, OISL, to investigate the claim of genocide and recommend appropriate investigations and prosecutions by the International Criminal Court. It is not necessary for me to say how important it is that this investigation must take place with the aid of an international court. We have very little reasons to believe that local machinery, local instruments of judicial investigation could bring us the necessary benefits that we would expect of them due to the experiences that we have had in the past. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on the 9th of December 1948 and acceded to by Sri Lanka in 1950 and provides in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Although the OISL investigation is a time-bound effort focused on February 2nd to November 2011, February 2002 to November 2011, Sri Lanka's genocide against Tamils began with the island's independence. Since then, Tamils across Sri Lanka, particularly in the historical Tamil homeland of the north and east, have been subject to gross and systematic human rights violations, culminating in the mass atrocities committed in 2009. Sri Lanka's historic violations include over 60 years of state-sponsored anti-Tamil pogroms, massacres, sexual violence, and acts of cultural and linguistic destruction perpetrated by the state. These atrocities have been perpetrated with the intent to destroy the Tamil people and therefore constitute genocide. This council is of opinion that during the period extending from 1948, when the Citizenship Act was passed to strip citizenship from a segment of the Tamil community and render them stateless, and continuing through the present day, successive Sri Lankan governments have perpetrated genocide against Tamils. Extensive evidence demonstrates that acts have been committed that constitute 4 of the 5 enumerated genocidal acts in the Genocide Convention. Let us take the first one, killing members of the group. When you go into the historical aspect of it, a series of anti-Tamil pogroms, fueled in part by fabricated rumors about Tamil violence against Sinhalese, began with the passage of the Sinhala Only Act or the Official Language Act. In 1956, on June 5th, 1956, at the urging of Sinhalese nationalists, a Sinhalese mob attacked Tamil demonstrators peacefully protesting the Sinhala Only policy and pillaged Tamil businesses in Colombo. I, as a youngster, used to go through all these things. We were spectators of many of these things. When the news reached Galoya, from June 11th to the 16th, Sinhalese mobs who were galvanized by false rumors about Tamil-initiated violence killed around 150 Tamils, injured about 100 more, and destroyed many Tamil-owned properties. Although police were present during the riot, they passively chose not to intervene and stop the violence. Their presence and inaction illustrates the government's intent to destroy the Tamil people in whole or in part. Non-violent Gandhian-style protests by Tamils increased over the next 2 years. In May 1958, Buddhist monks and other Sinhala nationalists organized anti-Tamil pogroms throughout Sri Lanka from May 22nd to the 27th in the North Central Province, Colombo Central Province, along the West Coast, and eventually the Northern and Eastern provinces. The Prime Minister himself spread false rumors about Tamil-initiated atrocities to incite violence against Tamils in the Sinhalese-dominated areas. Estimates indicate that 300 Tamils were killed, over 1,000 were injured, and 2,000 women were raped in the 1958 pogrom. In Jaffna in January 1974, a massive gathering at the Jaffna Esplanade was engrossed in a speech of a Muslim Tamil scholar, late Professor Naina Muhammad, on the last day of the International Association of Tamil Research Conference. The Sri Lanka police unleashed a brutal attack on the passive gathering, which led to the wanton death of 9 Tamils. This council notes that the memorandum submitted by the late Tamil United Front, I think it was called Tamil United Front then, not TULF, leader to visiting heads of states during the Commonwealth Conference held in Colombo in September 1974, placed on record important instances of serious human rights violations committed against Tamils on the island since independence in 1948. As far back as then itself, in 74, this was brought to the notice of the world by our leaders. From August 12th to the 20th in 1977, Tamils were attacked on the train from Jaffna to Colombo through the country, from Anuradhapura to Colombo, and in the hill country. Again, false rumors about Tamil violence against Sinhalese contributed to the rioting. I remember a friend of mine was traveling in that train, and he came back and said, "Oh, they said so much of lies, and we thought all that was true," to find that none of them about Tamil atrocities, which were spread among the Sinhalese, was true. But the reaction of the Sinhalese was against all those poor travelers from Jaffna to Colombo. About 300 Tamils were killed, over 1,000 were injured, and 25,000 were displaced. These pogroms occurred less than 1 month after Mr. D.R. Jayawardena took office as Prime Minister. Mr. Jayawardena said, "The deaths were regrettable, but a natural reaction to the support for separatism." Whilst the 1977 pogrom raged and the Tamil people were reeling from the slaughter, Prime Minister Jayawardena rose in Parliament on the 18th of August and arrogantly issued a challenge to the Tamils. "If you want to fight, let there be a fight. If it is peace, let there be peace." Vide Hansard, Volume 33, Number 2, Column 246. Mr. Jayawardena's victim blaming furthers the argument that the government intended to commit genocide in response to the increasingly popular Tamil resistance. The most horrific anti-Tamil pogroms known as Black July occurred in from July 23rd to the 30th of 1983 and involved state-sponsored Sinhalese mobs attacking Tamils and destroying their properties across the country, beginning in Colombo. Actually, it started very close to the residence of Mr. Swaminathan, who is now a minister. Just there at the Burrella Junction, it started. Towards the end of the week, false rumors that the LTT infiltrated Colombo resulted in massacres of Tamils by Sinhalese mobs who wanted to be sure there was no LTT presence. The mobs targeted and located Tamils using voter registration lists, which be damning evidence of the government's instigation of these attacks. How could you get these registration lists in advance unless the government was party to it? Over 3,000 Tamils were killed, 500 women were raped, 8,000 homes and 5,000 businesses were destroyed, and about 500,000 Tamils fled the country. In addition, as part of this program, over 37 political prisoners, Tamil political prisoners detained at Velikada prison, were killed by Sinhalese prisoners on July 25th. The survivors say that the prison officers facilitated these murders by letting the Sinhalese prisoners have their keys. Just prior to Black July, on July 11th, President Jayawardena was quoted in a newspaper saying, "I am not worried about the opinion of the Tamil people. Now we cannot think of them, not about their lives or their options. Really, if I starve the Tamils out, the Sinhala people will be happy." Now this is what the President of Sri Lanka said in July 1983 and reported in Daily Telegraph. This statement by the head of state clearly indicates the government's intent to destroy the Tamil people through killings, causing serious bodily or mental harm, and deliberately inflicting on the Tamil people the conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction. This council notes that the spread of false rumors to incite violence against a group is a hallmark of genocides throughout history, such as in Nazi Germany, Rwanda, and the former Yugoslavia. The Sri Lankan government has used false rumors as one tool in organizing Sinhalese mobs to commit genocide against Tamils. Black July is marked as the beginning of war in Sri Lanka. This council notes that the ethnic conflict had already begun, however. Both overt and covert acts of state terrorism by successive government regimes, often pursuant to the Draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act, translated into systematic and widespread extrajudicial killings of Tamils. The atrocities against Tamils included over 50 separate massacres of civilians before 2008 and the targeted assassinations of political, civil and community leaders, enforced disappearances, torture, use of sexual violence as a tactic of war, severe restrictions or bans on food and basic medicine, and forced displacement, including coastal communities from the northeast provinces. The Wani genocide of 2008-2009 had previously been rehearsed in the eastern province. On 28 August 2006, the Sri Lankan military began a multi-pronged offensive against the LTT administered region stretching from Sampur to Vahare. Heavy shelling forced civilians to displace towards Vahare. The UN reported that the Sri Lankan government first restricted international aid agencies and journalists from entering the area, and then completely barred food and medical supplies from reaching the IDPs. Presumed safe areas such as schools and hospitals came under heavy gunfire, according to the UN and Human Rights Watch. Thousands of Tamils died either due to shelling or gunfire, or as a result of their untreated wounds or starvation. On 19 January 2007, the Sri Lankan military entered Vahare with little resistance and began the process of colonizing the entire region. During the war, government military forces engaged in deliberate aerial, artillery and naval bombardment of civilian areas, and also used prohibited weapons and ammunition such as cluster bombs. According to UN estimates, 60,000 to 100,000 Tamil civilians were killed over the course of the 27-year-old long war. The large-scale and severe nature of the genocide also forced many Tamils to flee the northeast provinces and seek refuge in Tamil Nadu and western countries. If we come to the recent times, the Sri Lankan government intentionally corralled Tamils into the, or corralled, I'm not very sure about the pronunciation, corralled Tamils into the so-called no-fire zones in 2009 in a calculated and deliberate attempt to destroy as many Tamils as possible. According to the UN report of the Secretary General's panel of experts on accountability in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan government shelled on a large scale in 3 consecutive no-fire zones where it had encouraged the civilian population to concentrate, and even after indicating that it would cease the use of heavy weapons, it shelled the United Nations hub, food distribution lines, and near the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, ships that were coming to pick up the wounded and their relatives from the beaches. It shelled in spite of its knowledge of the impact provided by its own intelligence systems and through notification by the United Nations, the ICRC, and others. Most civilian casualties in the final phases of the war were caused by government shelling. Now, this is what the report of the Secretary General's panel of experts had said. Coming over to Callum McRae, director of award-winning documentaries about Sri Lanka with UK's Channel 4, reported on evidence that the attacks killing civilians were accurately targeted, so which means it was done deliberately. At the end of January 2009, government forces were killing approximately 33 Tamil people each day, with these casualties increasing to 116 people per day by April 2009. According to the Permanent People's Tribunal on Sri Lanka, this toll surged with an average of 1,000 civilians killed each day until May 19, 2009. In a submission to the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, the Bishop of the Mana Catholic Diocese, Right Reverend Dr. Ayapu Joseph, stated that according to the government secretariats, the population in the Vanni region in early October 2008 was 429,059. However, only 282,380 people emerged from the Vanni into government-controlled areas, according to UN OCHA 2009 statistics. Thus, over 146,679 people in the Vanni are not accounted for after the 2009 atrocities. The UN panel of experts also reported on an elite unit within the Special Task Force, STF, of the police that was directly under the command of Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapakse. The experts found that the unit was implicated in organizing white van operations in which individuals were abducted, tortured, and often disappeared. Callum McRae has reported that evidence exists depicting the systematic and cold-blooded execution of bound naked prisoners, and which also suggests sexual assault of naked female fighters. At least 200 deceased and mutilated bodies, primarily of Tamil women and young girls, were observed by the employee of an international agency at the mortuary of a government hospital in February and March 2009. Now, all this information has been taken from well-known reports of international organizations. So, any further information with regard to the validity and veracity of these information can always be asked, and we should be giving that. Number 2, we now come on to the second aspect or second limb of the section which defines genocide, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. In 1979, then President Jayawardena passed the Prevention of Terrorism Act, which gave security forces broad powers to search, arrest and detain suspects. The Prevention of Terrorism Act has been used to detain, torture and even murder many Tamil civilians. Mr. Jayawardena was also passed a constitutional amendment barring MPs who support separatism from Parliament which effectively eliminated MPs from the Tamil United Liberation Front from politics at that time. That is the 6th Amendment to the Constitution brought in August 1983. By curtailing Tamils' right to free speech and free expression, Sri Lanka has violated the Tamils' right to self-determination. The governments of Sri Lanka also committed acts of cultural genocide beginning on June 5th, 1956, when the SWRD Bandaranaike government passed the Sinhala-only Act, or the Official Language Act, which replaced English with Sinhala, spoken by 70% of the population at the time, as the sole official language. This act failed to officially recognize Tamil in any capacity. In the first Republican Constitution of 1972, Buddhism was privileged at the foremost place among religions in the constitutions. Although the term cultural genocide does not appear in Genocide Convention, it was included in the initial draft, and international criminal tribunals have found acts of cultural and linguistic destruction to constitute acts of genocide. The Sinhala-only Act and the privileging of Buddhism undermine the Tamil people's language and religion, predominantly Hindu. In this connection, I might refer to Sabeshwaran's case, where the Privy Council had wanted the Sri Lankan Supreme Court to go into the question of whether Sinhala-only Act was against the Constitution, because there was Section 29 of the then Constitution still prevalent. But the government went on not taking it up until the 1972 Constitution came in, and then it was a natural death for that case. The governments of Sri Lanka also committed acts of cultural genocide, beginning on June 5th, 1956, when SWRD Bandaranaike government, I must have read that earlier. The Sinhala-only Act and the privileging of Buddhism undermined the Tamil people's language and religion, predominantly Hindu. Nearly 10 years later, from May 31st to June 2nd, 1981, policemen and paramilitaries organized a program during which they killed 4 Tamils selected at random, destroyed TULF's headquarters, the residence of the Tamil MP, and burned the Jaffna library. I remember I was district judge in Chavakacheri, and on the day after the burning of the library, it was a Sinhalese policeman who was in charge of the Jaffna, in charge of the police station in Chavakacheri, who gave me the information early in the morning. So they have burnt the Jaffna library. And he mentioned certain high political personalities who were there and whom he thought were behind what took place. Over 97,000 books and culturally and historically important and irreplaceable documents were destroyed in this heinous act of a cultural genocide. High-ranking security officers and cabinet ministers were in Jaffna when security forces destroyed Tamil life and property, further illustrating the state's support of these acts. The government targeted the Jaffna library to destroy part of the Tamil people's culture, and cause them serious mental harm. On 5th of September 1990, the Sri Lanka army took 158 Tamils from the Bandaramule IDP camp. 5 days later, on September 10th, the Sri Lanka army took 184 Tamils, including 38 children under age 10, from Satrukondan and 2 nearby villages. There was only one witness who survived, who reported that all the detained had been massacred. They used to be cut into pieces, and they had cut a big trench and everybody was thrown into it. Despite various commissions of inquiry, the fate of these people is still unknown. This council notes that all historical and more recent genocidal acts have caused serious mental harm to Tamils, as successive Sinhalese-dominated governments have committed gross and systematic human rights violations against the Tamil people. The International Law Commission interpreted the mental harm standard to mean that the bodily harm or the mental harm inflicted on members of a group must be of such serious nature as to threaten its destruction in whole or in part. Thus, the acts of physical, cultural and linguistic violence against Tamils are tantamount to genocide under the mental harm standard, because extensive destruction of the Tamil culture and language threatens the Tamil people's survival on the island. Coming over to the recent incidents, the UN report of the Secretary General's panel of experts on accountability in Sri Lanka found credible allegations that security forces committed rape and sexual violence against Tamil civilians while screening those leaving areas of conflict and in the IDP camps. Yasmin Suka, one of the experts who contributed to the Secretary General's UN report, released her own report in March 2014, concluding that abduction, arbitrary detention, torture, rape and sexual violence have increased in the post-war period. This is after the war, post-war period. These widespread and systematic violations by the Sri Lankan security forces occur in a manner that indicates a coordinated, systematic plan approved by the highest levels of government. The report found a pattern of targeting Tamils for abduction and arbitrary detention unconnected to a lawful purpose, involving widespread acts of torture and rape. This report was based on 40 sworn statements from witnesses who testified regarding their experiences of abduction, torture and sexual violence by Sri Lankan security forces between May 2009 and February 2014. The report paints a chilling picture of the continuation of the conflict against the ethnic Tamil community with the purpose of sowing terror and destabilizing community members who remain in the country. The question is, after the war, what was the necessity for all this to happen, which has been correctly and properly recorded, except that it was with the purpose of sowing terror and destabilizing the community members who remain in this country. The report identified a practice of rape and sexual violence that has become institutionalized and entrenched in the Sri Lankan security forces. Survivors reported being raped by uniformed male officers from the Sri Lankan military. A Human Rights Watch report released in February 2013 also documented 75 cases of politically motivated sexual assaults of primarily Tamil detainees. Human Rights Watch found disturbing patterns strongly suggesting that sexual violence was a widespread and systematic practice, and concluded that rape was a key element of more wide-ranging torture intended to instill terror in individuals and the broader Tamil population. The report stated that sexual violence, as with other serious abuses committed by Sri Lankan security forces, was committed against a backdrop of deeply entrenched impunity. Further systematic attacks on hospitals during the 2009 military campaign caused serious bodily and mental harm to Tamils. Human Rights Watch documented at least 30 such attacks on permanent and makeshift hospitals in the combat area after December 2008. The destructive campaign has caused permanent mental effects on those who survived. Investigators with the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and Sri Lanka Ministry of Healthcare and Nutrition conducted a health survey of Jaffna district residents between July and September 2009. They found that the prevalence of PTSD 13%, anxiety 48.5%, and depression 41.8%, symptoms amongst currently displaced Jaffna residents is more comparable with post-war Kosovars and Afghans. As noted by the Permanent People's Tribunal on Sri Lanka, continuous displacement and endless trauma caused by protracted war had a devastating impact on mental health among Tamils. Further, the government hitherto has continued to impose restrictions on psychosocial support services in Tamil areas, which intentionally exacerbates serious mental harm. We have been seeing roads being put up, buildings being put up, but the government hitherto had not been interested in psychosocial support services for the people, which are very urgently needed. So thus far with regard to causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Now we come to the third one. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its